Hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm an architect and a software entrepreneur, and I teach within the master's program for design, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And today I'm going to give you a brief insight into how we work on spatial issues having to do with urban innovation. Now, urban innovation in general is an anomaly. Cities are really slow to transform. The budgets are usually public-private. It's usually total chaos. And yet, innovation can actually come from bringing in knowledge and history and tactics from software, from products, and that's what we're going to look at today. And we're actually going to look at one of the more traditional forms of design, in this case, campuses. And through the history of campuses, we'll actually see how urban innovation can actually come both from cultural context and also an interpretation of that context. So first of all, campuses in general, in Latin, they're a field. And the image of the campus was already pretty much set in the 16th century. Here we see Oxford. And the icon of grass and building has been with us ever since. The notion of a campus is always situated historically at the periphery of a city, not related to its setting. And you see that that logic was transferred then to the Ivy League universities in the United States. This here is Harvard University. It is the oldest landscape in North America. And it too was established at the periphery of Boston at the edge of the Charles River and was seen as this scenic, tree-lined campus. And here you see almost 400 years later, a rethinking of what it means to be in an enclave because Boston, that is Cambridge, already engulfed the university. And the university itself thought, Harvard University, that it needs to open itself up to the public. So you see in the work of Van Valkenburg that basically he's taken each of the entries into the campus and put in pedestrian walkways. Now, pedestrian walkways for a very elitist university is a huge step. It means opening up the campus to populations that, technically speaking, are not allowed indoors. It further manifests itself in his putting out furniture so that daily passerbys who walk through Harvard Square can take a seat and meet the students. These chairs are not just chairs. They were chosen very specifically. They were chairs that are designed for the Jardin des Tuileries in France and brought to Boston to offer a symbol of publicity. This whole notion then of a walkway and a campus was then picked up by the Chinese architect, Turenscape, and here he's thinking about how to actually make a campus in China, undergoing massive development. He was given a lot that was a rice field, and he asked himself, can he invert the equation, that rather than having grass and walkways that walk between them, that actually he take a productive landscape of rice fields. He make the rice fields grow, he maintains the historical ecology of the site, and makes the walkways the negative of them. The result are outdoor classrooms that are situated within the landscape. He at once has taken the historical reference and his interpretation of a walkway, and he's inverted it for the Chinese landscape. The same can be looked at in the work of Mies Van Der Rohe. This is the IIT campus in Chicago. Here, this is one of the leading German architects at age 50, transplanting himself from Berlin in post-World War II to Chicago, coming to downtown Chicago, and actually drawing a montage that in itself is outlandish. He's drawing a clean slate on top of the urban fabric and saying, no, there is this notion of modern buildings. The modern campus is the relationship between buildings, has nothing to do with the city, has to do with an aesthetic of placement. However, reality doesn't always work with the modernist vision. Here we see the campus almost 50 years later, in which downtown Chicago has undergone railways and depopulation, and the campus does not work as it was conceived as this white plinth. And working with this environment, Rem Koolhaas, who also is very, very acutely aware of the question of public and private in a campus, then reinvented a student center. But the student center, if you look at it, also addresses the question of pathways. However, in the United States, in the context of downtown Chicago, being aware that walkways cannot connect in an unconnected city, he then actually makes the walkways within the building. And in doing so is actually saying there is no public architecture, there is no campus, now everything is interior. In this way, he places the interior logic full of collages, full of spaces, where the interaction between people happens not on the outside, but then on the inside. Still, he's very cognizant of the equation of a campus, which is pathways, publicity, interaction. You see this also. This is usually stairs that you see external in public parks. He brings them indoors. I'm saying this because each of these things are thought out, are innovative, but they're innovative within the context of understanding what is the historical precedent. And here we have actually the same example in Tel Aviv University, again, the model of the 1950s of this isolated campus, but unfortunately, the image that they shoot of students being on the grass and having it really, really full is actually fake. What really you usually see are you see over-bleached grasses, too hot in the landscape, and that this image of grass and building that was adopted for the Middle Eastern climate simply does not work. The grass is never full. In addition, the relationship with the urban environment in the campus, if at once in the early 70s the student housing was part of the neighboring neighborhood, you now see that there are high-rises for students that they too are isolated completely from the urban fabric around it. There's another trajectory to campuses, and this happened in the 70s. In the 70s, there was this general fixation that buildings can be huge in their scale, and they can become a reality. Here we see the Free University of Berlin, and here too, there's a relationship between landscape and building, but scaled up. Locally, we have this at the central bus station in Tel Aviv, which is this mega monster. We have a similar example in front of the coastal plain. This actually represents a different idea of bringing in the pathways into a building that is so large that it itself becomes a landscape. Still, it's innovative compared to what came before. The same logic recently has been reversed by Dominique Perrault. He's a French architect. He's building here in Korea. And here, he also is rethinking what is the relationship between the ground plane, that is the campus, and the walkway and the building. And here he took an even more extreme step. He takes the landscape, the campus is on top, he cuts a building through it, and then you see that in fact what he's doing is he's giving back the full campus to the public. This is an completely open walkway, and the buildings are tucked underneath his new garden. So what he's done is he's reversed the equation, putting architecture underneath the public ground on top, and through the university, people walk. So here too, this is taking a very historical precedent and bringing it into a completely new and innovative form to question the role of publicity and privacy within a traditional environment of a campus. Here's another image of the campus itself, this huge public walkway, and here again you see it within the city. So here there's a beginning of forging a relationship between this closed entity and the space around it. But there are many other forms of campuses. It's not just the educational campus. We have, for instance, here in New York City, this is a cultural campus. Carnegie Hall recently went through a re-rendering. And here, too, the question of how to make something that was once private, public, made it to the table of design. Yes, they reinserted the classic green grass, but alongside it, they did a series of extremely innovative moves to make something that was formal to something that's occupied by people. Here we see they lift the green grass above the ground plane, they tuck activity underneath it. Here we see that they're using media so that on the stairs you have LED lighting that tells you what's going to happen during the day, so that passersby are then engaged with what's actually going on inside. Here you see that they have an installation of screens that then activate the space. They both communicate what's happening inside to the outside, but they also let passersby engage with the closed elitist campus of culture. The same thing here, you see the integration of media walls, and you see a situation in which there is no beginning or end to the publics that are now accessing the site. In addition, this may seem like a very small move, but it's actually incredibly productive on the site. You see a bridge walk that's actually connecting between the complex for music and the music school, Juilliard, which is right across the way. And what this has created now is that the students from Juilliard walk across this bridge and actually use the facilities that were never used before on the other side of it, something so minimal. Same thing, treatment of the ground plane, very innovative, questioning what is a seating area, what is a not seating area within this new space. And in general, you see that what ended up happening is that they transformed the whole relationship of what's happening around the building, outside and in. So you see that the street itself transforms itself into stairwells that can then look into the activity of the school and from the school outwards. So here again, this was completed in the early 2000s. You see a re-rendering of a very, very traditional space from 1950s, making it accessible to the public in the 2000s. Again, I'd like to pontificate here as well. Here in Israel, we're very used to actually coming into a building and being cross-checked for security. In the case of the music school across the way, Juilliard, what they've actually done is they've made a huge stair, which is publicly open. You can enter from the street, sit, eat your lunch, look at what's going on, and only afterwards access the school. So again, bringing public in. There is a whole other attitude. If we look at Google, for instance, Google has an attitude of talking, do no evil, but actually of being very isolated from the public. This is the Googleplex in California, in Silicon Valley. And their idea of a campus is actually to create a home where workers never want to leave. It's always nonchalant. But the thing is that they're actually taking people from San Francisco out to the periphery and back on the Google buses. But they were so isolated from the context of San Francisco that the Google buses, they get caught in the topography of the city. So that there's this isolation between the public that they actually want to bring and the urban context. But there's been a shift in terms of the closed work campus back to the city. Here you see WeWork. It's partially Israeli innovation, in which the notion of reusing a space or time-sharing of a space has opened up time-sharing offices in San Francisco, in Tel Aviv, and in Berlin, and several other cities. This is actually reversing the effect of a closed campus and bringing activity back into the city. Of course, this too also has an effect. It's actually raising real estate prices in San Francisco. And again, Google in Israel is also located in Haifa, not related to the city, located at the periphery, in an enclave in which, if you really want to go out and take part in the city, eat, drink, walk home, it's impossible. This is a vehicular logic. Israel is still within this logic. We're about 30 years behind. Here we're seeing another example, this time, of an incredible public work. It was recently completed. It was launched in 2007. This is the Brooklyn Bridge Park. And it is a sports and cultural campus as a parkway. Basically, they've taken 15 piers located on the waterfront and have reprogrammed them into an urban campus for sport activities. Again, the scale of it. And I'd like to focus on this as well. Here, as a result of the innovation that happened as to opening up the waterfront campus to the city, this is a project that was launched in Kickstarter. It's actually for a public pool that connects to the Brooklyn Bridge Park. And here too, you're seeing that within the context of innovation of bringing the campus back into the city, new tools today to raise funding are also available. This pool was funded, it's under construction this year. Again, a view of the waterfront meeting the sports campus. And in terms of publicity, media today is also an additional tool to bring awareness and engagement with these public campuses. In this case, you're seeing the Brooklyn Bridge Park's website. And every day, things that are happening on the website are actually updated and displayed to the public. I raise this because the issue of publicity today in the urban space is not just the physical, it's also the digital. And so here, the Brooklyn Bridge Park did the full gamut of actually reinventing the waterfront, but also reinventing how a park can actually re-engage its audiences. The reverse of this is actually Greece. Here you see the Olympic campus that was done for the Olympics, and less than 10 years later, it is completely derelict. All of the investment was actually thrown down. And all of this because when it was planned, it was not engaging the city. There was no vitality to actually make it work. The reverse logic of that can be seen in the London Olympics. The London Olympics, preconceived of its demise, thought of introducing the Olympic campus into the city as a vehicle for transforming the eastern edge of the city, and they had a very, very discrete logic about what buildings will be permanent and what buildings will be temporary. They also had a very precise engagement of existing assets. They wanted to clean the water. They decided to put sports activities in areas that they thought needed to be cleaned. The same has to do with where they positioned within the existing fabric sports events. Here you see volleyball with a backdrop of the palace. The question of a campus in the city is not necessarily a new one. Here we see in Munich, a university that's situated within the urban fabric, so that if you walk on the street, you suddenly become highly aware of activities that have to do with education within the city. The same thing goes, for instance, here in the Brooklyn Academy of Music. They took 4 buildings that were located at a distance within the neighborhood and are reactivating the site by connecting between buildings. So the real question becomes, if one is going to look at the urban campuses, is can we create spatial strategies that actually re-engage existing assets in the city with new uses? And if we close with this image, this is actually a pattern for a dress out of Buda, which is a dressmaker's tool. And you see that there are thousands of dresses on a single page. And only one dress actually demarcates a single entity for sewing. And here, the strategies that we're trying to develop for reintegrating the campus in the city have to do with creating new interfaces between existing assets, which means looking at users, at uses, at awareness, at overlaps, and contexts. So the second part of this lecture, which you can only see if you join the master's program, is actually to start investigating the tactics themselves that allow us to re-engage the campus in the city. Thank you very much.